This is the evidence number 3, document number 3, and this is an excerpt from Captain Preston's account. So this is the captain of the British soldier during the time of the Boston Massacre. I don't see a date, but I think as you'll read, you'll see this is his account pretty quickly after the actual Boston Massacre. So here's his account. On Monday night about 8 o'clock, 2 soldiers were attacked and beat. But the party of the townspeople, in order to carry matters to the utmost length, broke into 2 meeting houses and rang the alarms, which I suppose was to fire as usual, but was soon undeceived or informed. About 9, some of the guard came to and informed me the town inhabitants, or people living there, were assembling to attack the British troops, and that the bells were ringing as a signal for that purpose and not for fire, and the guiding light intended to be fired to bring the distant people to the country. This, as I was captain of the day, occasioned my fixing immediately to the main guard. So he thought there was a fire, but he's realizing and learning that the colonists are starting to assemble to attack the British soldiers. In my way there, I saw the colonists in great commotion and heard them use the most cruel and horrid threats against our troops. In a few minutes after, I reached the guard. About 100 people passed it and went towards the custom house, where the king's money was lodged. They immediately surrounded the guard posted there, and with clubs and other weapons threatened to execute their vengeance on him. So this is a completely different story than document number 1. We're learning that the colonists were the ones shouting mean things. There was lots of them, and they all had weapons. I was soon informed by a townsman their intention was to carry off the soldier from his post and probably murder him, on which I desired him to return for further intelligence, and he soon came back and assured me he had heard the mob declare they were going to murder him. Then I feared might be a prelude to the plundering or robbing of the king's chest, so he's got to protect the king's money. I immediately sent a non-commissioned officer and 12 soldiers to protect both the sentry and the king's money, and very soon followed myself to prevent, if possible, all disorder, fearing in case the officers and soldiers, by the insults of the rioters, soon be thrown off their guard and commit some rash or reckless act. So sounds like his intention is really just to protect the king's money and also make sure that people don't die from these rioters. The soldiers soon rushed through the people, and by charging their bayonets of half circles, kept them at a little distance. Nay, so far was I from intending the death of any person that I suffered the troops to go to the spot where the unhappy affair took place without any loading of their pieces, nor did I even ever give them orders for loading them. So he didn't want anyone to die, he didn't want anyone to get hurt. He just needs to show a force as to not steal the king's money. The mob still increased and were more outrageous, striking their clubs or bludgeons one against another and calling out, "Come on, you rascals, you bloody backs, you lobster scoundrels. Fire if you dare, damn you. Fire and be damned. We know you dare not," and much more such language was used. At this time, I was between the soldiers and the mob, parleying or negotiating with them and endeavoring all in my power to persuade them to retire peacefully, but to no purpose. They advanced to the points of the bayonets, struck some of them and even the muzzles of the pieces, and seemed to be endeavoring to close with the soldiers, on which some well-behaved person asked me if the guns were charged, and I said yes. Then they asked me if I intended to order the men to fire, and I answered no. So that's a completely opposite account of what the first newspaper said. So Preston is saying, I never intended for anyone to fire or get murdered, okay? My giving the word fire under those circumstances would prove me to be not an officer. While I was thus speaking, one of the soldiers, having received a severe blow with a stick, stepped a little on one side and instantly fired. Okay, so it looks like we heard about this blow with a stick in that first account, but the Preston is acting like he stepped to the side, and because of that blow is why he fired. Okay. On which, turning to and asking him why he fired without my orders, I was struck with a club on my own arm, which for some time deprived me of using it, which blow had been placed on my head would have destroyed me. On this, a general attack was made on the men by a great number of heavy clubs and snowballs being thrown, by which all of our lives were in immediate danger. Okay, so I know snowball is not quite like an ice ball, right? If I had an ice ball chucked at my head, I'd be pretty scared. Okay, so by all which our lives were immediate, some colonists were calling out, "Damn your bloods, why don't you fire?" So they're antagonizing them. Instantly, 3 or 4 of our soldiers fired, one after another, and directly after 3 more in the same confusion and hurry. So he is proclaiming that the colonists were saying, "Why don't you fire?" And perhaps the British soldiers thought that, "Hey, that's the command. I need to fire on the colonists." The mob then ran away, except 3 unhappy men who instantly expired, in which the number was Mr. Gray, at whose rope walk the prior quarrels took place. 1 more is since dead. 3 others are dangerously and 4 slightly wounded. The whole of this depressing affair was transacted in about 20 minutes. On my asking the soldiers why they fired without orders, they said they heard the word fire and supposed it came from me. This might be the case, as many of the mob called out fire, fire, but I assured the men that I gave no such order, that my words were, "Don't fire, stop your firing." In short, it was scarcely possible for the soldiers to know who said fire, or don't fire, or stop firing. On the people's assembling again to take away the dead body, the soldiers, supposing them coming to attack them, were making ready to fire again, and I prevented my striking up their fire blocks with my hand. Immediately after, a townsman came and told me that 4,000 or 5,000 people were assembled in the next street, and had sworn to take my life with every man's with me, on which I judged it unsafe to remain there any longer, and therefore sent the soldiers to the main guard. This last document or piece of evidence is called the Bloody Massacre. It's from Paul Revere, very famous, and it's the same year that the Boston Massacre happened. So this picture looks very different than the first. I do see that it's at night. There's some corroborating evidence in the main town square, so that's the same. However, this time the British soldiers aren't surrounded like the other picture. The British soldiers are the aggressors, right? I don't see any colonists with any weapons. It doesn't look like they're surrounding or antagonizing them in any way. The British soldiers are just firing on them for no reason, it appears. And I see the captain back here. It looks like it's definitely ordering them to fire. So a very different portrayal than the first image where the colonists were surrounding them and had weapons.